David, let's talk about the flight upgrades because there's been a widening probe around it. What measures can be put in place so that longer term we avoid things like special treatments for politicians?
Yeah, look, I just don't think it's necessary for politicians to be able to have a line to ring up and get a upgrade on their personal flights. That's not what the average punter can do. I think we should be in the same pot as the punter. You go into a pool, and if you're lucky enough to get one, you get one. If you don't, well, that's based on equality, on first in, best dressed, or whatever the policy is of the airline of the day. But I think this has added a level of murkiness to it, and particularly when you've got a decision made by this government around blocking extra competition to Qantas from Qatar that was going to hopefully drive down prices in international flights further, but also improve our export capability into the Middle East, because what sits underneath people's feet on those planes is, in fact, export goods, and most of it agricultural goods. So I just think there's some questions here for the Prime Minister, more so around his relationship with Qantas and whether that led to the decision made by this government to block Qatar being able to come in and compete and give greater competition to Qantas here internationally and domestically.
But regardless of the party that you're in, if you're a well-known politician and your name is recognised, you're given an upgrade, what's going to make sure that they can say no, or that they will say no?
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, if they talk to a government affairs person, then they circumvent the normal process of upgrades. I've put in for upgrades with my points and been rejected on a number of occasions, and so is my wife. So I think it should be. There is a structured process the airlines have around awarding those upgrades. I think that the reality is what's happened is that it's been circumvented by the fact of relationships with government relations and with CEOs of Qantas, and that's the element that should be removed. We should all be in the same pot, and whatever the methodology is for awarding that should be given based on a name, not necessarily on the actual methodology, not on the name.
And to an issue that affects every Australian, that is food prices. You're presenting the Food and Grocery Mandatory Code of Conduct Bill. How does this change, I guess, state of affairs?
Well, we're bringing in a mandatory code, but also divestiture powers, something this government wouldn't do. They brought in mandatory powers that won't come into effect until April next year. The cost of living crisis is today, not in 6 months' time. There are Australians tonight who won't have dinner. And when you have clear evidence and you have the ACCC chair who has made it very clear that she would like divestiture as a tool in her toolkit, why wouldn't we as legislators do everything we can to protect not just farmers but consumers? And so we're bringing in divestiture powers. We're bringing in a supermarket commissioner that will give a confidential basis for farmers to come forward and make complaints, and then give the ACCC infringement notices of $2 million if they do the wrong thing. The government's introducing one that goes up to $187,800 in 6 months' time. The supermarkets don't fear this. We've already got divestiture powers in this country. They were done in 2019. Albanese supported them. He was prepared to take on the big energy companies when there was a crisis there, but he's not prepared to take on the CEO of Coles and Woolworths. You've got to wonder why this Prime Minister is so out of touch when there are Australians tonight that won't eat.
But then those big retailers also employ a lot of people. What checks and balances are being put in place for the divestiture powers?
Yeah, we've put in place safeguards to ensure that a court, if they make that determination around divestiture, that there has to be a public interest test around employment. There can't be significant job losses. And we have to maintain and increase competition. That's a sensible safeguard that's put in divestiture policies around the world, and we're putting in place here to make sure there's no unintended consequences. That's the responsible thing to do. But what this is a deterrent, a big deterrent to say to the supermarkets, there's not just these little penalties that the government's going to bring in 6 months' time. These are ones that could be real and could be today if this government wanted to take our hand. But there are safeguards around that to protect the economy and understanding that we want little and smaller players to become bigger players. And we've got to create that environment if someone does the wrong thing. And if the supermarkets are as pure as the driven snow as what they tell us now, they have nothing to fear from us, nothing at all, because these laws will never be used, and I hope they never used. I hope Coles and Woolworths make make profit, but it's just how they make their profit concerns me.
Thank you so much. David Littleproud, Nationals leader.